Hey everybody, welcome to Board Game Heaven. My name is Raymond, and in this video I'm going to take a look at the Book of Dragons by Trefl. This is a game by designers Adam Strzelecki, Paweł Szuszki and Wojciech Wisniewski. I hope I didn't butcher those names too much. And it is a game for 2 to 5 players for ages 8 and up, which plays in about 25 minutes. It is a dice placement game where you're trying to capture dragons for your Book of Dragons, and these dragons live in lands that might gain you some advantage over other players by using its special ability. Now, before I explain how to play the game and share my thoughts on it, I would like to thank Trefl Games for giving me a copy to review, and I'd also like to ask you to please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because that really does help the channel a lot. And there's also a Patreon page where you can support me for as little as just €1 per month if you like what I do, and in return you get your name in the credits of all of my videos, early access to my videos, and also access to some Patreon exclusive videos. Alright, let's go and set up a game. To set up a game of the Book of Dragons, simply puzzle together the game board and then take a number of these tokens equal to the number of players. Always include the red one because that has the number 1 starting player number on it. And there's a number of other of these tokens in different colors, so depending on the number of players. So let's say we're a 3-player game, we take these 3, we leave these in the box, and you also take the corresponding dice in their color and hand that to each player. Next, you take these golden goal cards. They all have one dragon of a certain color on them. There are 6 different dragons in 6 different colors, and you shuffle those and randomly deal one to each player, and that is their goal. That is the color of dragon that will give them extra points. And these cards are open information, so every player places those face up in front of themselves on the table, like so. Then every player takes their dice and sets them to the values 3, 4, and 5. Then you take these silver dragon cards, and there's all kinds of dragons on them. The 6 different colors of dragons are represented on different colors of backgrounds, and that's the 6 backgrounds you also see on the board here, and they are mixed up so you can have different dragons on different backgrounds. You give that a shuffle and you divide that stack equally among these slots depending on the number of players. So with a 3-player game you use 3 stacks, in a 4-player game you use 4, and in a 5-player game you use all 5 stacks. There are 36 cards in the stack. So, for example, in a 2 or 3-player game, you'll have 3 piles of 12 cards each. In a 4-player game, you'll have 4 piles of 9 cards each. And in a 5-player game, you'll have 5 piles of 7 cards each, but 8 cards in the first pile. That's the setup. Now you're ready to play. Let's explain the rules. The goal of the game is to collect as many points as possible by getting these dragon cards into your Book of Dragons, and you will be bidding on these cards with your dice, and they are worth the number of points that are listed here in the top left corner of all of these cards. You simply add them up at the end of the game, and the player with the most points wins. And the dragons are worth more points if you get dragons in your color, and these are worth 3 extra points, it says so right here, plus 3 per dragon of your color. And starting with the player with the red immunity token with the 1 on it, you take turns in clockwise order, and on a turn you do one of 2 actions. You can either place your expedition dice, or you can take a dragon card that you bid on for your book. So let's explain how that works. First of all, by placing your dice, you can place any number of your expedition dice onto one or more of these visible, so that's the top dragon cards on the board. And to place a die on a card, the total number of pips on those dice must be greater than or equal to the number of pips listed above here. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pips. And you can distribute your dice as you wish among those cards. For example, you could place all of your cards here, although 5 would already be enough and 4 would be enough. Here you could actually do this if you wanted, but you can also group them together to make sure you have the highest bid on a certain dragon card. And if you want to make a bid on a card that already has an opponent's dice, so let's say the second player here, if we're going clockwise, also wants to bid on this dragon because it has the most points, then they have to exceed the value of these pips. So in this case, they could only bid more on this card if they placed all of their dice on this card. And when that happens and they bid more, you can't bid equal, it has to be more, then the other player takes back their dice, but as a consolation, they get to increase the value of those dice by 1. So the 5 becomes a 6 and the 4 becomes a 5. Of course, if the die already was a 6, then you can't increase it further. Another option you can do, let's say for example this player already had some dice here and it's this player's turn, nobody else outbid them, so they didn't take their dice back, and on their next turn they find they have some dice on a dragon card. That means that they can, if they want to, take back those cards and take the card as well. So you take back these dice and you take this card into your book of dragons. You just keep it in front of you, open information, but because you bought this dragon, your dice that were on it are decreased by 1 pip. So the 4 becomes a 3 and the 5 in this case becomes a 4. Again, with the exception, if a die was already a 1 on the card, then you can't decrease it any further. Now, if on your turn you find that you cannot do either of those two actions, so you can't place any more expedition dice and you can't take a dragon card, then the player instead increases the value of each of their dice by 1, and that ends their turn. Additionally, any player on their turn can use the special abilities of a dragon card that they already own. And the ability that a dragon has depends on the realm that that dragon is in. So these 6 realms here are also the backdrops of all of these dragons. So this dragon, for example, is from this ice or mountain realm right here. And there's also dragons. This one is volcanic, and this one is from the forest. And what that means, I will explain, but when you use that ability, then that dragon card is either flipped around or you simply put it underneath your golden dragon card, your gold card, to indicate that that has been used. It will still count as points at the end of the game, but you can only use a dragon's ability once per game. So the volcano landscape over here has no special ability. Those are usually cards with the highest value, but they don't do anything special for you. This is the Storm realm, and that means you can permanently remove from the game 1 visible dragon card on the board that has no dice on it. So if you want to get rid of this one, so this player cannot get extra points from the white dragon, you could, for example, if you have a dragon card with this Storm realm background, you can flip that card over and just remove this one from the game, just return it to the box. The desert background, like this one over here, lets you increase the value of one of your dice by 1 pip, and of course you can't increase a 6. The jungle here lets you increase the value of all of your dice, all 3, by 1 pip. And there's the mountains here. That lets you flip one of your dice to its opposite face, so a 1 becomes a 6, or a 3 becomes a 4, or a 2 becomes a 5. And these are the plains, and if you flip over a card that comes from the plains, you can immediately put your immunity token onto a dragon card where you have dice. No other player can place dice on that card. So for example, if this player had a card with the plains on it, then they could flip that card over and then put this on one of these. So for example, on that one, if they, oh wait, they have their dice over here, of course. So on that one, and their immunity will last until the start of their next turn, at which point you will return that immunity token for you, but that will allow you to buy that card, so nobody will have had the chance to overbid and you can take that card. Now remember that card abilities, especially for these dice, can never affect dice that have already been placed on a card. They only affect the dice that you still have in front of you. And the game ends when enough of these piles have become empty. So in a 2 or a 3 player game, it only takes 1 pile to be empty. And in a 4 or 5 player game, 2 of these piles will have to be empty. And at that point, the game ends at the end of that round. So that means this is always the first player. So all the other players that haven't taken a turn at that point, when that happens, can finish their turn. So the round is finished. And then all the players can count up their cards and just add up these numbers. And remember that any dragon in your color, so for example, if this player had golden dragons, those are worth 3 extra points for that player. And of course, the player with the highest score wins. In case of a tie, the tying player with the highest total value on their expedition dice wins. And if there's still a tie, then the tying players share their victory. When you're playing with just 2 players, then there's a variant rule that you need to take into account. You don't use the black dice for a player, you just take one of the black dice, and it is always placed on a 6, that's value 6. And during game preparation, you place the blocking die on the 3rd dragon pile. And you can place your dice on that card if you place more than 6 pips. So you basically have to bid more than that blocking die. And when you do, you move that die forward to the first pile again, and when that is overbid, it gets moved to the 2nd and to the 3rd, etc. Now if the blocking die gets moved, so if I bid more than 6 here and the blocking die gets moved to a card that already has a player's dice, then you remove those players' dice even if they have 6 or more pips, and you do not increase their value. The exception is if the player's dice are protected by immunity. Then move the blocking the blocking die to the next stack. All the other rules remain the same, and that's all you need to know on how to play the Book of Dragons. Let's go to my final thoughts. So my final thoughts on the Book of Dragons by Trefl. Well, let's start with the components. The components are very good. You get a stack of cards, which are of a good quality, a nice thickness, and a nice size as well, with clear printing on them as well, so you can clearly see what's on them. Of course, there's mostly just the dragons and their values and their backgrounds, of course, which are important to the gameplay. There is a nice and thick cardboard board that is made of 3 pieces that you puzzle together. That fits nicely into the box. And there's a lot of these chunky dice, 3 of each color. Of course, every player only has 3 in their own color, but they're nice and big, nice and chunky, nothing special really. They're just the base colors. You got yellow, green, black, red and blue, and that's all there is. You also have tokens in those colors. These tokens you can use for locking a card if you have that ability. And if you use that ability, you put one of these tokens on, and one of them is also to indicate the starting player, so you can easily remember who started the game once you start finishing the round to end the game. So the components are good. There's not a whole lot of them. The box could have been smaller, I think. I mean, the size has to do, of course, with the pieces of the board. So they couldn't make it narrower unless they had made the board in a different way. But it is kind of deep for, you know, just a stack of cards and some dice. I think it could have been thinner. But other than that, the components are very good. The artwork is lovely. I really like the artwork of all the different dragons, 6 different dragons, very colorful, very nicely illustrated, and the backgrounds are very nice and colorful too, and easy to make out. Even with the big dragons in the front, you can still easily tell that this is a volcano, and this is the mountains, and this is the forest. So you can easily tell what's what. So the artwork is very good. The theme is very loose. You're basically just trying to bid with your dice on cards with a value, and if they have the color of dragon that is yours, if you have one of these cards and that's your dragon, you're trying to get more of those because they are worth 3 extra points. And you're also trying to check out the background to see which of these abilities that are also on the board you want to use, because they are very handy and useful during the game. But it literally could have been anything. It could have been any theme, but I do like dragons and I do like the art for the dragons, but the theme doesn't really add to the game. You don't feel like you're going out hunting dragons or whatever and noting them in your book of dragons. It is literally just having your dice, and you don't roll them, they just, you rotate them as you play the game. So you're just bidding on cards, and that's what it is. So while the theme is nice, I do like the theme, it doesn't really add anything special to the gameplay. So the gameplay then is quite easy. The rules are simple, it's quick to set up, it's quick to play. You're basically just taking your dice and deciding on which card to play them. I've set up here for a 3-player game. Of course, 4 players and 5 players also take up these slots, so you have more choices. So with more players, I do like that you have more choices, more things to choose from. And there will be a bit more competition as well, because people are going to bid. Well, of course, with lesser players, you have lesser stacks. So I guess the competition is kind of the same, although I did find that with fewer choices, people would just pick one and put all their dice on those dragons and just get that, and the other people wouldn't bother going for those dice unless you know you have more points. And of course, that's open information. You can look at everybody's dice and do the math and know how many points they have. But that also means that the player who's placing their dice first knows, well, if that player has more points than I do, then they're probably going to try and take this card from me because this is 8 points and this is only 5. So I might go for the 5 points, and if that happens to be a dragon in my color, then I get plus 3 points, so it's 5 points for me anyway. So let's do that, and you put your dice on that card. And then the other player might choose, well, I could take that card from them and deny them the 3 extra points, but then I only get 5 points, but they would get nothing because they would get their dice back. But of course, when you get your dice back, you rotate them up 1 pip, so you get more points in the next turn, so there's that. So there is some player interaction. It kind of depends on the turns and what cards you uncover, because sometimes it's just a simple matter of, oh, I want that one, and this player wants that one, that player wants that one, and then next turn they all take that card. So you either place your dice or you take a card, and that's all you're doing. So yeah, it is very simple. It's very straightforward. It is fun though, for a bit. I think the replayability is okay. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's fun to play. But usually after one game, I do move on to another game. But then the next game night, I could bring it out again and we'd play it again because it's so fast. It's a good filler game if you're waiting for other players to arrive, or if you've split your group up into 2 games and one game is finished and the other is not. You can play a game like this quickly to kill some time until the other group is ready. So this game does lend itself well for that, and it's also in a, the box isn't super big, so it can be brought with you. You can actually just leave the box and just take the cards if you need the board to remember all the abilities. If you have memorized all the abilities, you don't even really need the board, because it's just basically a reference to what you can do with the different backgrounds on the card. So had all of those references been printed on the cards themselves, then you wouldn't need a board, and this entire game could have been in a small square box that only had the cards and the dice. And I mean, then you could have had a very portable edition of this game. But yeah, and of course a couple of tokens, but there's not that many. So I think the replayability is okay for as long as you enjoy this type of game. But since it's a quick filler, I do think, like I said, it doesn't overstay its welcome, and it's kind of fun to just quickly play. There is no language dependency, so that is a big plus. You get your instruction manual, and in this case I had a German and an English version. I'm sure there's different versions as well with different languages, but that's all you need to know. You can teach these rules very quickly and just get started, and it is very intuitive because, like I said, everything is referenced on the board itself, and otherwise just colors, your color of dragon and your color of background, and those backgrounds do something, and you have your dice. So it's 100% language independent, which also gets a big thumbs up from me. So in the end, it was an enjoyable game, certainly a good filler game, but if you're a more of a heavy gamer and you're looking for something more crunchy, then I suggest looking elsewhere, or at least trying before you buy, because this is in essence a quick bidding game and trying to get as most points as you can. Again, I'd like to thank Trefl for giving me a copy to review. I hope you enjoyed this video as well. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. That really helps the channel. Also, check out my Patreon page by clicking the link in the description below or the icon at the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Board Game Heaven.